How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chav Gimel, Daf 23 of Masechta Sanhedrin, friends. Your friends. Today we are starting the third parak of Masechta Sanhedrin. Zeborer. It's going to talk about judges and witnesses and who's kosher and things like that. Today's daf, I don't know. It's hard. I think it might be maybe a little tricky, but yeah, it's pretty good, I'd say. All right, let's start. We are going to start in Daf Chav Gimel Aleph all the way at the top with the new parak at the Mishnah. Dinei Mamnis Bishlosh. Okay, so of course, monetary cases are tried with 3 judges. Zebor. Okay, so now this Mishnah is like, I don't know, a little bit, I don't know, maybe tricky, you could say. The Gemara is basically going to jump into trying to figure out what's going on and try to make sense and explain the Mishnah. So there's a lot that needs to be worked through in this Mishnah. Zebar lo echad, zebar lo echad. Rashi points out based on what the Gemara is going to ask, and it's kind of weird, and there's all sorts of, it is kind of weird, I guess. But anyways, Rashi points out that Zebor lo echad implies that it's talking about Kilu. Let's say you have Reuven and Shimon. Shimon lent Reuven $1,000. Okay, so now they're going to court for whatever reason. So Reuven chooses one bezdin of 3. Zebor lo echad, and Shimon chooses a bezdin of 3, which is 6 now. Vishnei borin len od echad, and then they, I don't exactly know, I don't understand who, the 2 bezdins, or maybe Reuven and Shimon then jointly choose another bezdin, so now you have 9. I don't know, it's kind of weird. But the Gemara is going to kind of not stick with that. That's what Meir's opinion. The Chacham say Shnei Dayanin borin len od echad, the 2 judges choose the third. Okay, fine. I don't know. Maybe it makes sense to give you a spoiler alert. Basically, the Gemara is going to saying it's not talking about 9 judges. It means the 2 litigants. Reuven chooses a judge, Shimon chooses a judge, and then Reuven and Shimon jointly choose a third judge. So we're going to talk about that as well. The Chacham say that the 2 judges choose the third judge. Okay. Now, this also requires the Gemara to explain what exactly is going on. But both Reuven and Shimon could disqualify each other's judges. Whereas the Chacham say, wait, not so fast. Under what circumstances can a judge be disqualified? Only if proof has been provided that this judge is a relative of one of the litigants, or is otherwise possible, maybe he's a thief. But if they were kosher judges, mapitom, or mumchin, mipi bezdin, or expert judges, and you can't just passel a judge willy-nilly. Meir says that each one can disqualify the other's witnesses. The Chacham say, when can you disqualify witnesses? Only if you bring proof that they are relatives or otherwise passel. But if they are kosher, you cannot passel them willy-nilly. Okay, this also is going to require explanation from the Gemara. So there's a lot that we need to explain about this Mishnah, and the Gemara is going to proceed to do just that. So the Gemara jumps right in and asks, as I explained when I was explaining the Mishnah, which is kind of weird, but zebar lo echad, zebar lo echad, ushnei borin len od echad, we want to assume for now that it's talking about bezdins, that Reuven chooses a bezdin, Shimon chooses another bezdin, they jointly choose a third bezdin. We're talking about 9 judges. The Gemara said, why are we talking about 9 judges? All you need is 3 judges. So this is what's going on, and this is still assuming multiple bezdins, but soon we're going to say, no, we're not talking about Reuven choosing a bezdin and Shimon choosing a bezdin. We're talking Reuven choosing a judge, Shimon choosing a judge, and then them jointly choosing a third judge. Not 9, not 6. But anyways, for now we're still assuming that they're choosing bezdins. Okay. So this is what's going on. When Reuven chooses a bezdin, okay, for them, but then Shimon disqualifies Reuven's bezdin. So then Shimon chooses a bezdin, but then Reuven passes Shimon's bezdin. So then they jointly choose a third bezdin, and that will be the bezdin that they use, and they chose the bezdin together. The fact the Gemara of afilu love matzi ma'akev. What do you mean? Even Reuven, right? Shimon lent Reuven $1,000. So Reuven's the borrower, Shimon's the lender. Reuven, the borrower, is in a position that he could disqualify Shimon's bezdin. Rebbe Elazar says, Lo shanu ele malve, avalov kofanosu v'dambiro. This is talking about a scenario where one of the litigants wants to go and travel to a better court. So we say, okay, the malve can compel the love to do that. The lender can compel the borrower to do that, but the borrower, avalov, the borrower kofanosu, we force him v'dambiro, force him to, and we judge in his community. So keilu, the borrower is in a weaker negotiating position as to choice of bezdin. Well, and for the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan bar kosher b'suya, Shanu Yochanan bar kosher b'suya. Well, it's talking about a kosher b'suya. It's talking about judges. It's talking about batei dinim that were known to be weak, not very good batei dinim. What does Rashi say? By kosher b'suya, shelo hayu bekiyin b'din Torah. They weren't experts in din Torah. Ilka chafilu lo v'matzmakev. So therefore, since we're talking about people that we know already milichatchila, then they aren't such experts. They don't really know halacha that well. So because that's the case, even the borrower would be in a position to disqualify them. Okay, fine. Where am I? Fine. Aval mumchin lo, but not experts. The love, the borrower, would be unable to disqualify an expert bezdin. Okay, Rav Papa says, Rav Papa filutema mumchin. You can even say that the borrower can disqualify a court of mumchin. For example, if we're talking about the bezdin of Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, right? Because both Rav Huna and Rav Chisda were in Surah. So if Rav Huna has his bezdin and Rav Chisda has his bezdin, so then Reuven, the borrower, could say, I don't want to go to Rav Huna's bezdin, I want to go to Rav Chisda's bezdin, because after all, they're both in the same place anyways. Because the borrower could say to the lender, look, I'm not inconveniencing you at all, because after all, they're both in Surah, both Batidinim are in Surah. But we learned in our Mishnah that the Chachamim say that the two judges choose another one. Now, if it enters our mind, though, like we said, that we're talking about Batei Dinim, that Reuven suggests a bezdin and Shimon disqualifies it. Shimon chooses a bezdin and Reuven disqualifies it. And then they're choosing a third one. And the Chacham say that it's the judges who choose that third court based on this, right? We're talking about Reuven chooses a bezdin, Shimon chooses a bezdin. And the Chacham say that after Shimon disqualifies Reuven's bezdin, Reuven disqualifies Shimon's bezdin, the Chacham say that the judges are going to choose the third bezdin, but we've just proved that they are invalid judges. Why would we trust them to choose a third bezdin? If it enters your mind, like we said, bezdin, that we're talking about batei dinim, Reuven's bezdin, Shimon's bezdin, basu de pastelu, azlu verelu, bedin achrine, I don't understand. We've just disqualified the first two bezdins. Why would the Chacham say that those disqualified bezdins are now going to choose a third bezdin? But more so, the Mishnah sounds like this is Pashit what we do. The way that we explain the Mishnah, we're talking about ideally if Reuven chose a bezdin and Shimon acquiesced. Shimon was okay with Reuven's bezdin, so then it stops right there. We'll use that bezdin. But the implication of the Mishnah is that no, Zebar lo echad v'Zebar lo echad. Reuven is choosing something, Shimon is choosing something. The way that we explained it is that if Shimon accepts Reuven's bezdin, then Shimon doesn't choose anything. We'll just go with Reuven's. But the implication of the Mishnah is that no, Reuven is choosing something, Shimon is choosing something. They're both together choosing another thing. So this whole thing is kind of weird. Elo hachikamar. Rather, this is what's going on. Zebar lo dayin echad, v'zebar lo dayin echad. Rather, Reuven chooses one judge. Shimon chooses a second judge. Shneim barin loyin od echad, and then Reuven and Shimon jointly choose the third judge. That's what it's talking about. Whereas the Chacham would say that instead of Reuven and Shimon jointly choosing the third judge, the two judges would jointly choose the third judge that they're going to judge with. So and why do we do it this way? So they say because like this, you have the two litigants, Reuven and Shimon. If Reuven is choosing one of the judges and Shimon is choosing one of the judges, and then they jointly choose the third judge, that way they're involved in the judicial selection process, and and that way the case will be judged truthfully, in the fairest possible way, and with the broadest sort of acceptance, right? Because they both chose the judges, and therefore they understand that the outcome is fair. Okay. So the Chacham say that it is not Reuven and Shimon who jointly choose the third judge. It is the two judges that jointly choose the third judge. Nemak b'dir of Yehuda, Rav Kamifligate. So let's say that the machlokas between Rav Meir and the Chachamim is they're arguing about the concept laid out by Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. The Amar Yehuda Amar Rav, Eino edim chos min al ashtar elim ken yodim mi chosim imayin. That says Rav Yehuda Amar Rav that witnesses will decline to sign a document unless they know who they will be signing with. Okay, it's important for witnesses to know who else's name is going to be on that document. Who are they going to be associated with on that document? So similarly here, the judges are going to be sitting in a bezdin. The two judges are going to be sitting in a bezdin with a third judge. The question is it important that they know who this third judge is that they're going to be sitting with? Rav Meir seems to be saying it's not important. Reuven and Shimon will appoint the third judge. The two judges don't need to know who the third judge is going to be. Reuven and Shimon will appoint the third judge. Whereas the Chacham said the two judges are appointing the third judge, so they would agree with the statement of Rav Yehuda Amar Rav that it's important for them to know who they're going to be sitting with. So Rav Meir leislei de Rav Yehuda. So let's say that Rav Meir does not hold the Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, and therefore Reuven and Shimon jointly choose the third judge. It's not up to the two existing judges. But when it is to Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, whereas the rabbis hold of Rav Yehuda Amar Rav that the two existing judges will choose the third judge because it's important for them to know who they will be judging with. Lo nit. Now everybody agrees of Rav Yehuda Amar Rav that that witnesses signing on a document, right, will want to know who they're signing with, and similarly here, judges presiding on a case want to know who they will be judging with. Even Rav Meir agrees with that. The question is, do we additionally need the litigants to be involved? Everybody agrees that in terms of the judges, the judges have to be on board with judging with each other. Where they argue, where Rav Meir and the Chacham argue, is with regard to the litigants. Rav Meir says we also additionally need the knowledge and the acquiescence of Reuven and Shimon. Whereas the rabbis say, look, the judges need to know who they are judging with, but the Baalei Dinim, don't necessarily need to be in control of the third judge. Gufo, we said earlier, Amravuda Marav, says Vuda Marav, Eino Edim Chosman al Shtar B'chule, that witnesses will decline to sign on a document unless they know who they are signing with. Tanya Nami, Hachi, we also learn in a Bryce like this, Kachoy Niki Adasu B'Yushalayim Osin. The people of clean thought in Jerusalem would do this. Lo hayu chosmin al shtar elam ken yodim michosim imoyin. They would decline to sign on a document unless they knew who they were signing together with. Lo hayu yoshvin badin elam ken yodim miyoshiv imoyin. And they would decline to sit in a bezdin, in a court, unless they know who else was going to be in that court. Which other judges were going to be with them, and they would decline to enter, to go and participate in a suda unless they knew who else was going to be at that suda. Givaldig. Let me just think for a second if I should switch the recording now. Okay, this is getting into a whole thing. Maybe I'll do that. Okay, 1 second. Okay, now we get into like the apostling stuff. Okay, so we said Zebar Loecha, Reuven chooses the judge, Shimon chooses the judge, etc. Now we get into Rab Meir had said that Reuven can apostle Shimon's judge, Shimon can apostle Reuven's judge. The Chacham say no, you can only do that if you bring proof that they're objectively problematic, Kroven or Psulin. But if they're Ksherim or Mumchin, the Chacham say you gotta leave. You can't just apostle them. So we're gonna now try to understand what exactly is machlokes between Reb Meir and the Chacham, particularly. What does Reb Meir hold? What did you just say? You could just apostle people willy-nilly? So let's see. So kol kamine de apostle daini effect the Gemara. Right. So apostle daini v'chol. So kol kamine de apostle daini. I don't understand. According to Reb Meir, it just says apostle daini shazev is apostle daini shazev. What? I don't understand. What? Reuben could just decide. Meh. I don't like that guy. Just like that. So I'm Yechanan by Kosher B'Surya Shanu Aval Mumchim Lo. Okay. So Yochanan says, look, when Reb Meir says that Zeposu De'Eno Shazev is Zeposu De'Eno Shazeh, it's talking about Kosher B'Surya. It's talking about in Batei Din that they were not experts. They were not expert judges. Because they're not expert judges, that is why simply Zeposu De'Eno Shazev is Zeposu De'Eno Shazeh, that they could apostle each other's dayonim. But if they were experts, Reb Meir would say no. Reb Meir would not say that you could just apostle an expert judge. Who are you? Who are you to do so? Unless, of course, you bring proof that the Kroven... well, that was Chum, but I mean, I would have to imagine Reb Meir agrees with that also. Right, that you bring proof, then they're disqualified. But Reb Meir would say that you can't just apostle an expert judge, but if he's not an expert judge, then you can. Okay. Mumchim lo. But Hamadiktani Seifa, but the Chacham say, Rabbi Mediktani Seifa, the Chacham say the Chacham, Emasai, when can you apostle a judge? Bismach Mevraisha and Kroven Opsulin, if you bring a proof that they are a relative or apostle, Aval Imhayu Ksherin, O Mumchin Mipi Bezdin, but if they were Ksherin or Mumchin, Any Achul Foslan, you can't apostle them. Michlam implying to Meir Mumchin Nami Kamar. The Meir saying that you can apostle Mumchin, right? Meaning the Chacham are responding and they're saying, Mapitom, Reb Meir, you can't apostle a kosher, you can't apostle a mumche. Implying that Reb Meir is saying that you can. You can apostle a kosher, you can apostle a mumche. And the Chacham are saying, no, you can't. So, from the Chacham's response, that they're saying to Reuven, you can't apostle a mumche, right? The Chacham's response is they're saying to Reb Meir that you cannot apostle a mumche, that implies that Reb Meir says that you can apostle even a mumche. Hochi kamar, where am I? This is what is going on. Avol im hayuk sherin. No, what's happening is the Chachamim. Okay, Reb Meir says that you cannot apostle a mumche willy-nilly. The Chacham, but Reb Meir would say if they are not a mumche, for example, a Korosh B'Surya, you can apostle a judge willy-nilly. So now the Chacham responded and said, no, you can't. If they are ksherin, then you have to leave them alone. Right? Avalim hayu ksherin, said the Chacham. if they are ksherin, even if they're not experts, but they're ksherin, naisu kimumchin mipi bezdin, then we treat them as if they are mumchin ve'enu yochel lefosa, and you cannot passel them, according to the Chachamim. So both Reb Meir and the Chachamim agree that a mumche cannot be passeled willy-nilly. Machlokes is between the Reb Meir and the Chachamim is with regard to a kosher, somebody who's a kosher person but is not an expert. Reb Meir says you can passel that judge, and the Chachamim say no. If he's a kosher, we treat him as if he's a mumche, and he cannot simply be passeled willy-nilly. Tashma, come and hear. Amulo, the Reb Meir, they said to Reb Meir, Lo kolemenu sheposo dayin shemumche lirabim. That the Chacham respond to Reb Meir, and they say, Reb Meir, you can't just passel a judge who is a mumche lirabim. Well, that seems to be implying that Reb Meir says you can passel a mumche. No, ema lo kolemenu sheposo dayin shehimchuhu rabim aleim. No, rather say that the Chacham are saying to Reb Meir, you can't just passel a judge that the public has accepted upon themselves as if he's an expert, but he's not actually an expert. So meaning, Reb Meir, basically we're talking about ksherim, who aren't actually experts, and Reb Meir is saying you can passel them, the Chachamim are saying you can't. Tanan Amiyachi, we could learn in a brisa like this, L'olam posel v'holech hachikabel olav bezdin shemum chilirabim de Reb Meir. Reb Meir says, look, you can keep on passeling judges and saying no until you have a bezdin that is entirely comprised of mumches. At that point, you can't simply just judge them for without proper cause. Okay, de Reb Meir, that's Reb Meir's opinion. Fine. Now, okay. So that's where we're at, is that Reb Meir is saying that you can passel a kosher judge so long as he's not a mumche. If he's a mumche, you can't simply passel him. But now, frakti Gemara, v'edim k'mumchin dami, v'amar Meir zeh posel edav shazeh, v'zeh posel edav shazeh. The sefer of the Mishnah, Reb Meir says that each litigant can passel the other's witnesses. Now, witnesses, so long as they're testifying about what they saw and they're telling the truth, so they're experts. I mean, there's no special qualifications that they need. Like, they simply saw what they saw. So witnesses are be'etzem, treated as the same way that we would expect experts. And yet, Reb Meir seems to be saying, Zeh posel edav shazeh, zeh posel edav shazeh. You can passel each other's witnesses, and they're basically experts. So wouldn't that imply that Reb Meir is saying that you could passel even experts? Again, witnesses are like experts. Reb Meir says that each litigant can passel the other's witnesses. So that would imply that you can passel mumchin. So Itmar Allah Rish Lakish, but 1 second. Rish Lakish says about this, Pekadosh Yomar Davar Zeh, would a holy mouth, like the mouth of Reb Meir, really say that you could simply passel witnesses? Tni Eido, rather say his single witness. If there was only one witness, so then each litigant can passel the one witness. Lamai, in what circumstance would there be one witness? You generally need two witnesses. In Leim L'Mammon, if we're talking about for Mammonis, and let's say, Shimon lent Reuven $1,000, Shimon takes Reuven to court for whatever reason, and he brings one witness. Or Rachmana Pasle, the Torah says that one witness is possible. You need two. So what's the chiddush that Reuven's saying that Shimon's witness is no good? One witness generally is not good anyways. Ila shvua, and if we're talking about Shimon brings a witness to be mechayiv Reuven a shvua, but Shimon brings one witness to be mechayiv Reuven a shvua, well then Reuven can't simply disqualify that witness. We believe that witness to be mechayiv a shvua. Heimuni mehem and kivei trei. Right? One witness is believed in order to passel. One witness is believed in order to be mechayiv shvuah. So why would Reuven be able to just simply disqualify that witness? So the olam le'mamin. So it is talking about mamin. Okay, so wouldn't you need two witnesses? Lo tzricha de kible ole kivei trei. But Reuven said, okay, it's fine. I will accept. So meaning Shimon is bringing one witness to testify against Reuven. Reuven says, I accept that I know that we need two witnesses, I accept that one witness. So my Kamash Malan, so what's it coming to teach? The Matzi Hadarbe. Okay, so therefore, and it's teaching what? That even though Reuven says, okay, I accept the witness, he can always change his mind. So Kilu Reb Meir is saying that even though Reuven said that he accepts the witness, Shimon's one witness, Reuven can still change his mind and say, forget about it, it's only one witness. One witness is not actually valid. So my Kamashman, the Matsu Adabe, effect the Gemara. So what are we teaching? According to Reb Meir, if you have this one witness and Reuven says I accept him, he could then renege and say I don't accept him. Well, Tanina, we already know this from a Mishnah. I think it's the very next Mishnah, maybe. Yeah. Amelo, that's tomorrow's daf. Amelo neman olay abba nemanon lemon olay avicha nemanon olay gimurei baker. That if one of the litigants says, I accept upon myself the authority of my father, of your father. Now, of course, relatives these are talking about judges. Relatives are not able to judge. Or Nemanolai Gimurei Bakr, or these 3 cattle herdsmen who are not Tamidei Chachamim, I accept them. Reb Meir says, look, you can always be Choser. He said he's going to accept them. But at the end of the day, they aren't actually valid judges, so you can always renege. No, he can't. And once he accepts them, he can't renege. For Amar Rev Dimi, Breder of Nachman, Breder of Yosef, Kigon de Kible Ole Bichad, and it's talking about where Kilu, let's say Reuven says, yeah, I accept my father or your father as one of the 3 judges. Kilu is together with two other kosher judges, but with 2 other kosher judges. But he of course is puzzled because he's a relative. But let's say Reuven says, look, I accept him as a judge, and Reb Meir is saying, even so, that he's with 2 other kosher judges, he could still back out after he accepts him, because at the end of the day, Abba Vavicha is a puzzle judge. And therefore, here also, of course, if Reb Meir would say that if Reuven says, yes, I accept as one witness for Mominus, and one witness, of course, is no good because you need 2, he can always renege and go back on it, because one witness is not a valid witness, you need 2. So just like you could be Choser and Abba Vavicha, even when he's with 2 other kosher judges, here also you could renege. So then what is the Chiddush if we're talking about one judge? So tzricha we need it, because the Tana Abba Vavicha, because if we would only have the case of Abba Vavicha where he's there with 2 other valid judges, maybe that is where the rabbis say that the litigant cannot be Choser mishum da Abba Vavicha Chazul Amma, because at the end of the day, Abba Vavicha, they're kosher judges in general, right? Meaning the issue with a parent being one of the judges is that it's specific to this particular case because they're judging a child. But if this litigant was anybody else, there wouldn't be any issues at all. So maybe that is why the Chacham say that once they've been accepted, it cannot be reneged. But maybe in our case, where Reuven accepts Shimon's one witness as 2, where Dila'amalo Chazi, that one witness will never actually be will never be valid. You always need 2, and this is always going to be exceptional. Maybe the Chacham would admit to Reb Meir that in this case you can renege when one witness is accepted as 2. So therefore we needed the Chacham to say that even in this case as well, once it's accepted, it's accepted. And if you only have this case, maybe this is where Reb Meir says that he can renege, but in the scenario of Neman Olai Av Vavicha, Ema Modu Luder Abonan, maybe Reb Meir would admit with the rabbis that he cannot renege, since in general Av Vavicha Kilu, as judges they would be valid, just not for their children. So tzricha, so therefore we need the machlokas in both cases to say that Reb Meir in both cases says he can renege, and the Chacham in both cases say he cannot once it's been accepted. Okay, But fact the Gemara. The Gemara is the Kash. That we just explained the Mishnah. Then it says Zeposel Eidav Shalzeh, Zeposel Eidav Shalzeh. It means Eido Shalzeh. The thing is, Amadiktani Reisha Dayano V'Seifa Eidav Amadavka Katani. But if you look at the Mishnah, it says in the Reisha it says Zeposel not Dayanov Shalzeh, but rather Dayano Shalzeh, Zeposel Dayano Shalzeh. And in the Sefer it says Zeposel Eidav Shalzeh, Zeposel Eidav Shalzeh, which is weird. Kila, we want to say when it says Eidav, it really means Eidav, but I mean, in the ratio, when it was talking about an individual judge, it had no problem saying dayano. So if the Sefer is talking about individual witnesses, it should say eido. Why does the ratio say dayano and the Sefer says eidav? It seems to be explicit that the ratio by the dayanim is talking about individual judges, whereas by the witnesses we're talking about multiple witnesses, a pair of witnesses. So Amr Belazar says Belazar biba hu ve'acher liposlon. So says Belazar. It's talking about a scenario where so Shimon brings two witnesses, and Reuven, together with another, comes to passel Shimon's witnesses. Shimon has two witnesses, Reuven together with somebody else is coming to passel Shimon's witnesses. Called Kamine Nogei Be'edusu. But how could Reuven join together with somebody else to passel Shimon's witnesses? Reuven obviously has an interest in doing that because Shimon's witnesses are going to testify against him. So how can he be believed to passel Shimon's witnesses? So Rav Achabre, Dravika Kagom, for example, Shakara Olav, Ir. I was talking about, for example, that there was some kind of issue with Shimon's judges. Ir Demai, what kind of issue? Ilim Ir de Gazlanusa. If we're talking about, well, Reuven is coming together with another to say that Shimon is a thief, that Shimon's witnesses are thieves. Called Kamine, Nogebe Eduso. Who? We can't just believe Reuven to testify together with somebody else that Shimon's witnesses, or at least one of them, is a thief. I mean, he's no ge'ebed, just to testify that he's a thief. So Ella ir to begam mishpacha. Rather, Reuven is coming together with somebody else to testify that Shimon's witnesses, there's some kind of a pagam mishpacha. There's something, for example, he comes from a family that, his father was an Eved Kanani who was never freed. Reb Meir says this is acceptable because Hani HaMishpacha Kamasai Devi'u Memele Kapasu. So Meir says that's acceptable. Reuven can join together with somebody else to testify about the family of, let's say, one of Shimon's witnesses, because Reuven, you can argue that Reuven isn't testifying about Shimon's witness directly, but rather testifying about his family. And he's believed to testify about a particular family, and if he's believed about that family, so Memela, the witness, then kind of can no longer testify because he's an Eved. But he's not testifying directly about the Eved, and therefore we would not be considered Nogei Be'edus. Rabbanan Sav sof Nogei Be'edus. So whereas the rabbis say, look, at the end of the day, what's Reuven doing? He's coming to passel Shimon's witness, and therefore we can't believe Reuven to do that. Kasser of Dimi, when Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Amar Reb Yochanan, he said in the name of Reb Yechanan, Machlokas b'shtei kitei Eden. Aha. So he explains that Zeposel Edav Shazeh is talking about two groups of witnesses, meaning Shimon had said, I have two groups, so Shimon lent Reuven $1,000, now they find themselves in court. Shimon says, I have two groups of witnesses, two pairs of witnesses that I'm going to bring. Reuven then passels one of the groups. And then Shimon is now having trouble finding the second group. And this gets back to a machlokas that we had at the end of Masechta Bava Basra, and we're going to quote that machlokas, about tzarich levarer or not. Kilu, when Shimon says, I'm going to bring two groups of witnesses, does he actually have to follow through on that? So Kilu, when he brings one group of witnesses, and then Reuven passels that group, that pair, and Shimon said he's going to bring another pair, does he actually have to bring that? Do we require him to bring that second pair or not? So Kiyasur of Dimi Amr Yochanan, Machlokes b'shtei kitei Eidim, is talking about when Shimon said he's going to bring two pairs of witnesses. So meaning, excuse me. Okay. So meaning, if Shimon simply has one pair of witnesses, Reuven can't simply passel that pair of witnesses. He can't do that. It's no gay be'edus. Shimon's bringing witnesses against Reuven. Reuven can't simply disqualify them. But if Shimon says he's going to bring two pairs of witnesses, well then Reuven can disqualify the first pair, because it's not like he's not really helping himself that much, because there's still going to be the second pair to testify against him. So he's not really, improving his position necessarily by passing the first pair, because there's always the second pair. But what happens in a scenario where Shimon says he's going to bring two pairs? He brings the first pair. Reuven disqualifies the first pair, which is okay, because ultimately Shimon's going to bring a second pair. But then Shimon can't find a second pair. So the question is, how do we now look at the first pair that was disqualified? Do we view them as only one pair of witnesses, in which case Reuven cannot disqualify them? Or do we say, look, Shimon said he's going to bring a second, and therefore within that context they were disqualified and it's acceptable? So meaning, Reb Meir says, tzarich levar. Reb Meir holds that, well, Shimon said he was going to bring a second pair of witnesses, and we view it in that context, i.e. we view it as if there are two pairs of witnesses, and Reuven disqualified the first pair. They're disqualified. They're posel edav shilzeh. He disqualified the witnesses. Shimon said he's going to bring a second pair, which means that Reuven was able to disqualify the first pair, and it's on Shimon to bring. He said he's going to bring a second pair. He has to bring a second pair. It's not. We're not going to, say, okay, well, we only have one pair of witnesses, and Reuven can't just posel when there's only one pair. We don't say that. Shimon said he's going to bring. He has to bring. And the first group that he brought, Reuven disqualified. Whereas the Chacham say, ain't tzarich levar. Whereas the Chacham say, look, he said he's going to bring two pairs. And because he said he was going to bring two pairs, so Reuven disqualified the first pair. But now he's unable to find the second pair. Which means Memele, and okay, so we don't force him to say, well, you said. No, okay, if you can't find the second pair, so Memele, what do we have? We only have the first pair. Well, when you only have one pair of judges, well then Reuven can't simply disqualify them, and therefore the Chacham say, no, right there, he wouldn't simply just be able to disqualify them, he would have to bring some kind of proof that the Krovim are psulim. Okay. So back in the Gemara, so again, because Rav Dima came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel Amar, Rabbi Yechon, he says in the name of Rabbi Yechon, Machlokas b'shteki te'etim. The Machlokas between Rav Meir and the Chachamim, about the posel edav shalzeh, we're talking about where Shimon says he's going to bring two pairs of witnesses. So Rav Meir says he has to bring var. So meaning, talking about where Shimon says he's going to bring two pairs of witnesses. He brings the first pair. Reuven disqualifies the first pair, which is fine, because anyways Shimon says he's going to bring a second, but now he doesn't find the second. So Rav Meir says tzarich levar. Well, Shimon said he's going to bring two pairs of witnesses. He has to, follow through on his word. And we treat it as if we expect Shimon to bring that second pair, and Reuven's disqualification of the first pair stands. Whereas the Chum say, no, Shimon doesn't need to follow through on that. And if in the end he can't find the second pair, okay, so all we have is one pair, Reuven is unable to disqualify them. The disqualification is invalid. But if all Shimon promised and all Shimon brought was one pair of witnesses, Meir would also agree. Reuven can't simply passel Shimon's witnesses. In front of Ravasi said, I assume before Rav Dimi, what if there's only one pair of witnesses? What do you mean if there's only one pair of witnesses? When we just said that if there's only one pair of witnesses, Reuven cannot passel them. So the nimtzes kashnia kroven opsulin mao. No, rather, what if Shimon says he's going to bring two pairs of witnesses? He brought the first pair, Reuven disqualified them. Okay, and Shimon then brought a second pair, and they turned out to be kroven or psulin. So how do we view things, right? If the second pair turned out to be no good, so then what's our relation? How do we view the first pair? So Omar Loen Kvar Heidu Eidim Rishonim. So Rav Dimi says, look, the first group already, right? Reuven Be'etzim already disqualified Shimon's witnesses, and that is that. The Gedamer that those say, Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi Kfar Idu Eidim Rishonim, that it's Rav Ashi who says that Reuven already disqualified Shimon's witnesses. Okay. So let's say that this machlokas between Reb Meir and the Chachamim is like the machlokas between Rebbe and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel that we saw in Bava Basra. So again, name is Bepukta the Rebbe Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Kamifrei. The Tani that we learned about Abba Lidon B'Shtar Uv'Chazaka Nidon B'Shtar Tiv Rebbe Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Om Nidon B'Chazaka. That if Shimon comes to Reuven and says, Reuven, what are you doing on my field? Reuven says, what do you mean, what am I doing on your field? It's my field. I bought it from you. I've been here for 3 years. I have a chazaka. And not only do I have a chazaka, I also have a shtar. So Rebbe says, okay, well, if Reuven says he has a shtar, he must provide that shtar. Or whatever, we haven't really gone there yet. But Rebbe says he shows the shtar, and Reb Shimon Gamliel says, the chazaka, right? Where am I? Right? If Reuven says, "Look, I have a shtar and a chazaka," nidon b'shtar to Rebbe. So Rebbe says, "Okay, we rely on the shtar." Reb Shimon Gamliel nidon chazaka, whereas Reb Shimon Gamliel says we rely on the chazaka. We ask, I don't understand Reb Shimon Gamliel's opinion. V'lo b'chazaka v'lo b'shtar. And why would Reb Shimon Gamliel say that we rely on the chazaka and not the shtar? The whole point of a chazaka, if you remember from Perek Chezka Sabatim, the reason why it works when Reuven says I've been here for 3 years is because we assume that, look, Reuven can't hold on to his shtar it can't be expected to hold on to his shtar forever. And therefore, after 3 years, even if he loses the shtar, we say, okay, fine. In lieu of the shtar, we could rely upon the fact that you've been here for 3 years. But really, the shtar is what we want, just that we can't expect you to hold on to the shtar forever and lose your field if you lose the shtar. No, rather, we say in case you don't have the shtar, fine, we can rely upon the chazaka, but the shtar is king. If you have a shtar, then of course it works. So why would Reb Shimon Gamliel say that we rely on the chazaka? What, you can't rely on the shtar? The shtar is better than the chazaka. So ela ema af bechazaka. So rather I'll say no, even with the chazaka, either one. If you want to provide the shtar like you said, okay, provide that. If you can't find the shtar, okay, fine, the chazaka will work. And we say, right, I think we explained the machlokas a few ways, but one of the ways that we said is that b'tzarich levar kamifgeh. They're arguing about, do you have to be mevar that? Meaning, according to Rebbe, look, Shimon came to Reuven and says, what are you doing on my field? Reuven says, look, it's my field. I've been here for 3 years. I have a document. So Rebbe says, he said he's going to bring a document, so he must bring the document. And if he can't find the document, he's in trouble. He said he's going to bring it, he has to bring it. Whereas Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, I know he said that he has the document, but he doesn't necessarily have to bring the document. If you can't find the document, you can rely on the chazaka, that's fine, even though he said he's going to bring a document. So Rebbe says, tzarech levayer. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, ain't tzarech levayer. And therefore Rebbe would be like Reb Meir, tzarech levayer. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel would be like the Chacham, ain't tzarech levayer. Okay, no. Look, Reb Shimon Gamliel Kulam Lo Plige. Okay, so look, in terms of Reb Shimon Gamliel's opinion, which is Ein Tzarech Levar, so clearly that would be like the Chacham who say Ein Tzarech Levar. The question is with regard to Rebbe's opinion. Ki Pliga Libe to Rebbe, to Reb Meir Ki Rebbe. Okay, so obviously Reb Meir who says Tzarech Levar would be like Rebbe who says Tzarech Levar, but V'Rabbanon Amilach, but the rabbis who say that in this case with Reuven parceling Shimon's witnesses, and Shimon said he's going to bring 2 groups of witnesses, but he can only find one group, and the Chacham said Ein Tzarech Levar, and therefore Reuven is not believed to disqualify Shimon's witnesses, the first group. So he would say that even the Chacham would agree with him here, that even Rebbe would agree with him here, that ain't tzarech levar. Rebbe said over there with the shtar, that when he said he's going to bring the shtar, that he owns the field, he has to bring it. Because at the end of the day, the chazaka is only coming on on account of the shtar, right? Really, The shtar is the main thing that we want, the documentation that Reuven owns the field. But because of the fact that we can't expect a person to hold on to the document forever, we say in lieu of the document, eventually a chazaka could work after 3 years. But the chazaka is really going sort of on the foundation of the original shtar. And therefore, when Reuven says, I have that original shtar, we say, okay, fine, follow through with that, because that's really what we want. But over here, with two separate groups of witnesses, where they're completely unrelated, Rebbe would agree, Ein tzarich levayer. Right? The second group of witnesses has nothing to do. The second group of witnesses that he said he was going to bring have absolutely no connection to the first group. Rebbe would agree here, Ein tzarich levayer. The Chacham would argue, and even Rebbe would say that Reuven would be unable to disqualify that first group of witnesses when Shimon can't find that second group that he said he would find. When Reuven came, he says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, So it's talking about where Reuven says that he's going to disqualify Shimon's judge as well as his witnesses, and he manages to passel the witnesses. So since he managed to successfully passel the witnesses, so we say, okay, fine. He said he's going to passel the witnesses and the judges. He already successfully passeled the witnesses, so we assume that the judges are also passel. And the Chacham disagree and say, no, we're not going to assume that he passeled the witnesses, so we assume that the judges are also passel. Whereas the Chacham say, no, we're not just going to assume that the judges are passel. Sefer Dayanim Psulim ve'edim ksherin, and the Sefer is talking about where he successfully passeled the Dayanim. Okay, so Domingo the Pasel Dayanim Pasel Nami Edim, and according to Reb Meir, since he successfully passeled the Dayanim, so we'll also assume that the Edim are Psulim, and the Chacham say, no, we're not just going to assume that the Edim are Psulim. Ma'askif l'Rav, Rav Asakashi b'Shlomo Migo the Pasel Edim Pasel Nami Dayanim. Okay, I can understand. You could say that since he successfully passeled the witnesses, we can also assume that the Dayanim are passel. Okay, you can bedina achrina. Okay, you can always go to another bezdin. But elamigo the pasel Dayanim pasenami edim. But just to say that since you successfully passeled the Dayanim, we assume that the edim are passel. For edim su leko. But there are no other witnesses. So how could we just assume based on migo that those witnesses are passel? Lo tzricha deika kas acheres. It's talking about where there's another group. Haleka kas acheres mai. So what? Then we were saying if there's no other group, so meaning we're saying that once he passels the Dayanim, we can assume that the Edom are also ksherim, but are also once we passel the Dayanim, Rebbe says you can also assume that the Edom are psulin as well. But why would we do that? Because there's another group of witnesses. But how do Rav Dimi? Well, if that's the case, that we're saying we could passel one group. So long as there's another group, that's what Rav Dimi is saying. It could be now migo. Yeah, but the difference is that Rav Dimi never said anything about migo. Ravin says this migo, that once you passel the Dayanim, we could also, we believe in that the Edom are passel. The Maisavar, Amina migo, Maisavar lo Amina migo. That Ravin holds of this migo, whereas Rav Dimi does not hold of this migo. All right. Wow, that was a big daf. Okay. That was the first half of the third parak of Masechta Sanhedrin of Zeborer. Oh my gosh, what a mission! Whew, there was a lot in that Mishnah about how we choose judges. Right? Mary says that. This Mishnah relied heavily on the Gemara to explain it. So basically, Mary's opinion is that Reuven chooses a judge, Shimon chooses a judge, and then essentially both the judges and the litigants are on board about the third judge, whereas the Chacham say just the two judges choose the third judge, because everybody agrees that the judges need to know and agree to who else they will be judging together with. We talked about parceling judges. Basically, according to Reb Meir, you cannot parcel a mumche judge, but if they're not a mumche, you can parcel them. The Chacham say, no, even if they are not mumches, but they're kosher, then we treat them as if they are mumches, and they cannot be possible according to the Chacham. We talked about how to disqualify witnesses. We thought that maybe it could be talking about where there's only one witness. We kind of proved that wrong. Then we talked about a scenario where basically, so one way to understand is that you can passel a witness if you are basically testifying about them that their family is pogrom, and then memele they are disqualified. Rav Meir says that's acceptable. Chacham say it's not acceptable. We talked about a scenario where one of the litigants said he's going to bring two groups of witnesses. So since he said he's going to bring two groups, maybe the other litigant can passel the first group. Since he's going to bring the other group, what if he doesn't actually find the other group? Rav Meir says that it's still passel. The Chacham say that no, they're not passel. We talked about and it's a machlokes about tzarich levayro or not. Connected that to a scenario in Bava Basra that we saw. Then we saw the opinion of Rav Dimi of Ravin, who says that it's talking about where he says he's going to passel both the judges and the witnesses, and he passels one. Does it also passel the other? Rav Meir says yes. The Chacham say no. Azoi, very technical stuff, but also somewhat interesting. That was Daf Chav Gimel Masechtas Sanhedrin. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.